I wanted to talk about this idea of people being poor, hungry, desperate, or these categories of poverty, hunger, and how they are indeed fabricated. Because if we look at it, poverty, hunger, and desperation comes from number one, people being taken away from the land they resided in, borders being constructed, and moving people away from where their livelihoods once were. And to tackle these things, we must zoom out and discuss the full systematic scope of what has led to poor, hungry, desperate. And let me zoom out. Let me zoom out. But I say that to mean that whenever a place is addressed or is described as being violent, poor, hungry, desperate and violent are two things that I think are synonymous, because people that are desperate will react in acts of violence because they feel like there are no other options. For example, if you live in a place that doesn't have any opportunities for you, and you're hungry, once again, it creates a situation where you're desperate and what you are going to want is food, and that leads to you, for example, stealing, which is described as a violent act but comes out of desperation. Without addressing the root of the issues, without coming together and saying, oh, the issue is that, number one, why are these people poor? What did they do before? And what can they no longer do? What is actually, oopsie, what is actually affecting the things that are as they are right now, and not what are the things that are happening. So, for example, with nomadic communities nowadays experience the largest or experience the most marginalization, especially if they live in rural areas, for example, and they still try to practice their nomadic practices. And why do they experience high rates of what is defined as poverty? It is because they can no longer move as they did. The weather patterns are no longer the same where they have been designated to live now. And in places, for example, like Tanzania, where they're being pushed out of their land continuously and squeezed into smaller and smaller and smaller subsections of land when they used to be nomadic, it creates a situation where people are more likely going to be hungry because they cannot move around as much as they used to. And so their cattle, in terms of drought or in times of drought in one of the areas, they can't just carry their cattle to the other area they used to carry their cattle, because like now there's a border and now they need paperwork to cross over when it was more of fluid movement that existed before. And so to act like these issues exist in a vacuum, or these issues only exist in a certain area, is to deny the history that has occurred so that these issues take place. It's to deny that people were forcibly removed from the areas they used to peruse and go around. People were then put into a smaller area, and because they cannot go around, they cannot feed their cattle, and they cannot produce as many cattle as they used to, and the areas where they are currently forced to live cannot recover fully from their cattle eating and hurting. And so without the discussion of all of that, without the needed context of, number one, what happened to these people? What are the factors affecting these people? we're never going to be able to solve any issues, because most of the themes that you will begin to find is that there's either been a series of displacements occurring, and displacements either created by borders or created by infrastructure projects. For example, creating roads displaces people, and that is not acknowledged, because where these people moved. And then conflict arises in these areas because people are not able to have the necessary resources. And so the conditions that created desperate, hungry, and poor people are the conditions that we should be tackling, which are land theft, most first done in the context of colonization, now done in the context of politics and people taking people's lands, because they know they can afford to steal title deeds, and they can afford to sanction land as government land. So that's one of the ways land is stolen. Number two, what was their means of livelihood? And where are they now? Can they do that? And that is such an important thing when it comes to discussions around how the systems that we inherited continue to affect us today. Because no one wants to steal. No one wants to be poor. No one wants to be desperate. But people are put in these situations where they're poor, desperate, and hungry. And not to mention shelter, but shelter is under poor, because it is a form of poverty. And people are put under these conditions and just like expected to thrive, do better, do well. When, what are you supposed to do when a whole road was built and it divided your community? A whole highway was built and your community is never the same. The way you used to walk before, the routes you had, the way you got resources before is no longer viable, because there's a road in the middle of where you live, and the environment has now changed because there is a road, which means more cars passing by where you live. And so I just think we should pause for a second and consider all the things as they are happening and why they're happening, because we tend to blame people for being poor. We're like, oh, you're not working hard enough. We're like, oh, these things happen in that place. Ooh, whoop-dee, whoop-dee, ooh. Without fully taking into account the ways in which these places have been shaped to be this way. Because once again, no one wakes up and they're like, I want to be poor. Like, no one wakes up and says that. It's been systematically cut out that and designated that these people will be poor, and we can't accept that as is, because that is not, life is not like that. Such is not life.